All right, friends and family, my name is John Rushameza. This is the Counter Revolution podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to unpack the topic of education and to equip Christians to think biblically about education because education is, in fact, discipleship. My desire is to redeem, reform, and reclaim all education as a ministry of the family, first and foremost, and also the local church, because the local church is the foundation and pillar of truth, according to First Timothy 3:15. I say the family first because God gave the children to the parents. The children belong to God, and then God assigned those children to their parents. And so their parents working for God to raise those children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord are the primary educators of those children. But parents, Christian parents, truly Christian parents, are to be members of a local church because God commands us to be a part of it and not to forsake the assembling together, the coming together of the local, of together as Christians in the local communities. Again, the Bible says that the local church or the household of God is the foundation and pillar of truth. Jesus himself said that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one comes to the Father except through him. Elsewhere, Jesus said that you're either with him or you're against him. You're either for him or against him. You're either gathering with him or you're scattering. So those kind of things and many other places in the Bible we find that education, first and foremost, starts with the family and then in the church and nowhere by the government. So I'm saying all that to open up because I'm about to talk about something that I've been talking about online for some time and also on this podcast. But I just want to kind of continue to drive this point home because I believe this is the only way we're going to wake people up when it comes to education. Before I go any further, I would ask you to please consider subscribing to this channel. Hit the bell notification so you can be notified whenever I release an episode. If you're listening to this on a podcast, please go and give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform so we can get this message to as many people as possible. With that being said, today I want to discuss something that recently came to my attention. Now, this is not new to me. This is something that I already knew. But on X, formerly known as Twitter, the AFT, American Federation of Teachers, it's a union. It's I think the second largest teachers union in this country. Recently posted, quote, education should be directed to the whole personality of the child. We have ignored this too long at our peril. Uh, it it quotes from someone saying Leslie whatever is right. No education is complete until it includes social and emotional learning, building up the whole child and their values. Now, in my post on Facebook, I said that, as I and many others have been saying for some time now, that education is discipleship. Education and discipleship are two sides of the same coin, and anyone in the education field denying this is either ignorant or is just plain lying to you. I'd like to emphasize that again here on this podcast, and that is to say that education is very much discipleship. Discipleship and education are not two separate uh, programs, right? And I think this is how Christians were duped because Christians were convinced that, hey, You do your job at home, discipling your children, and we will educate your children. And so you can trust us to educate your children. Just do your part as a parent, discipling your children. Well, guess what? The children are not discipled because the the majority of the discipleship process actually happen in the school. So parents at home um, are moving according to the beat of the school system, not the other way around. In other words, parents are playing a supportive role to the school system rather than the school system playing a supporting role to the parent. If you remember, as I just said a few seconds ago, God gave the children to the parent, and so the parent are supposed to be the primary educator. But we have set up a system and a kind of a culture where the parent is actually a supportive role. And so their quote unquote discipleship at home is actually uh, not as effective as you would think in most cases because there's a huge, uh, significant influence of the school system, their friends at school who, in many ways, do not even come from Christian homes, and then the system itself, the worldview that undergirds the system itself, is antichrist. Is not with Christ, therefore it's against Christ. So education is discipleship. If I can get anything else to go through, and for pastors here in America to get and understand and really take advantage of, because that actually means we have a gift, right? We have been given a gift. You don't have to worry about whether the kids are going to grow up to love the things of God. You can actually raise them up without ever sending them to the government school. You can raise them up within the church walls and educate them and have them spend that 16,000 hours, 16 to 20,000 hours that they actually end up spending with the government. We can spend that time with them, and the chances of them actually growing up as stronger Christians increase. So education is discipleship. But my post here on the AFT screenshot here is making the point that even the AFT recognizes that statement that says education should be directed at the whole personality of the child means that they think that education is not just about reading, writing, and arithmetics, right? Social and emotional learning is discipleship. This is where they teach certain values. Now, the values they teach in the schools are not anchored in anything that Christians, biblical Christians, would agree with, right? Because they will never preach that Jesus is Lord. They would never preach that salvation can only be found in one name. They would never be preached. They will never preach that uh, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. They will never preach the truth that uh, marriage is only between one man and one woman, and that sex and gender are really synonymous, and that there's only two genders, males and females. They would never agree to this. If, at best, they would leave it to individuals. Hey, you believe that? That's on you. That's your personal beliefs. You believe that? That's your personal beliefs. But we're going to suspend our personal beliefs when we come into the school system. But social and emotional learning believes that bullying is wrong, and social and emotional learning also believes that telling someone that homosexuality is sin and abomination in God's sight is not allowed. They would consider that bullying. refusing to affirm someone who believes that they were born in the wrong body, they would consider that wrong as well, right? So secular humanism is a discipleship process. Social and emotional learning is a discipleship process, just not unto Christ. And to me, it's simple, but I think it's hard for some people to understand this. And by the way, you cannot opt out of social and emotional learning. A lot of people don't realize this. You cannot opt out of a anti-bullying program. You just can't. So, social and emotional learning is a process of discipleship. The American Federation teachers agree. And here's another thing. Sure, they might not call it discipleship, but they obviously believe this. They obviously believe that they can shape and mold children, right? According to them here, uh, by getting their education system to be directed at the whole personality of the child. And by the way, when you say the whole personality of the child, you are talking about spiritually as well. Now, people are like, come on, John, you're being ridiculous. Well, actually, the people, CASEL, which is, according to my notes here, I always forget the name. It's Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. They are the big pusher, the main pushers of social and emotional learning. One of the biggest funders of this project is an organization called the Fetzer Institute. Now, the Fetzer Institute is unapologetic about their spirituality. Okay, if you go to the Fetzer Institute was an organization, and we have talked about the Fetzer Institute and John Fetzer on this podcast, but according to their own website, they said that John Fetzer was a successful 20th century businessman, a pioneering broadcaster, and the owner of the Detroit Tigers baseball team. He was also a lifelong devotee of faith and spirituality and a generous philanthropist. When he passed in 1991, he gave the majority of his wealth to and found and fund the Fetzer Institute for religious, charitable, scientific, library, and/or educational purposes. This is the Fetzer Institute. Now, they're not Christians, just in case someone was wondering. But the Fetzer Institute has played, as I was saying earlier, a major role in pushing and funding social and emotional learning. Now, if you're confused about social and emotional learning, it's a doctrine of demons. Okay, I have shared about social and emotional learning on this podcast. I've brought in a number of times um, Rhonda Thomas uh, uh, and others to speak about the demonic nature of social and emotional learning. But the Fetzer Institute specifically are actually one of the biggest funders of this particular educational process. And the whole language about the whole person development or the whole child development, that is language that is plucked, that is emphasized and pushed by the Fetzer Institute, because the Fetzer Institute that the whole child process includes the spiritual personality of the child, right? So there's a video that they recently put up on YouTube. I actually found this video in the work of Lisa Logan. She shared a very powerful article on Substack, which the article was discussing um, the article was talking about uh, the real religious origins of social and emotional learning by Lisa Logan. She her Substack is called Education Manifesto. She said this to open up her article. She said, "Did you know that social and emotional learning circle time practices used in schools across the nation are actually based upon specialized form of dialogue drawn from theosophical, Buddhist, and Native American church practices called the way of counsel?" She said, quote, "Neither did I. For years, I thought the original Fetzer Institute meeting in 1994 that was said to have launched collaborative for academic, social, and emotional learning in the entire field of SEL was the beginning of its story. I recently learned that that's not where SEL began at all." So she goes through this article to chase down exactly where SEL began, the different ideas that came together for decades, and all these basically uh, Satanists and devil worshippers that came together to cook up the idea uh, of social and emotional learning. Now, at the end of her article, she asks these questions. She says this. She says, "It boils down to this. Was social and emotional learning put into schools to benefit children, or is it being used as a vehicle for religious conversion? It's time to figure this out if we're going to get ahead of the Fetzer Institute's current new venture, the Collaborative for Spirituality in Education." Which then brings us, ladies and gentlemen, to the video talking about this new venture that they're venturing on as the Fetzer Institute. Okay, so let's listen up, and we can react as we go.
Teaching early on, a little second grader came up to me and said, "My grandmother died. Where did she go?" And my initial response was not to say anything. I realized later on that I, as a teacher, could have clearly welcomed in that part of who a child was.
And it
Now, I'm pretty sure that kid's parents would object to that. Like, that's not your place. That's your parents' place. That's your pastor's place. Me, as a school teacher, that's not my area of expertise, especially seeing that my religion may not align with your parents' religion. But no, this lady or man, whatever that person is, doesn't think so at all.
really is a part of us. Research suggests that not only is spirituality innate, it's also an essential part of childhood development.
You don't say. You don't say. They're just not figuring this out. I mean, this is biblical. We've known this uh, for thousands of years by now. I mean, those of us who are insisting that education is discipleship, you cannot separate education from religion.
Genetic epidemiological twin studies show us right at puberty, we start asking the same questions. What is my meaning? What is my purpose? Actually, what is the meaning? We now Have 20 years of science that shows us we're all naturally, innately spiritual beings.
The science of spirituality might be news to you, but these
No, it's not.
studies were put into motion over 3 decades ago with support from the Fetzer Institute, an organization championing educational programs that are proving how the spiritual part of a child is essential to the whole.
Society tells young boys not to be vulnerable. That was a big thing I was fed into. And it wasn't until I had to look back at myself that I was able to be fully human as I want to be.
What? Amen.
We have an epidemic.
Now you'd think these people plan on talking about a separate school, private schools, institutions out there where they're doing this, where they're talking about the science of teen spirituality, right? You think, or at least you think this is a Christian country that is finally acknowledging the place of spiritual education, spiritual discipleship among the teenagers. But newsflash, spoiler alert, this is in public school system. This is, they're going to do this in the public school system. The system you pay for. You and I, we all collectively together pay for. Not willingly for some of us, by force. The money is taken without our say-so or agreement. We're funding an institution that is allowing for this kind of stuff to take place.
Epidemic amongst teens and young adults of depression, of addiction. The rate of death by suicide now rivals the rate of death by auto accident in high school, and this presses now into middle school. I'm trained as a clinical scientist, and I learned that depression was to be understood as a problem of chemical imbalance in the brain, as a psychological eclipse in just about any way, but the way that I had sensed in my own path was the road to recovery through spiritual deepening. 40 years ago, we threw religion out of the public square for a
You forgot to say Christianity, but go ahead.
good reason. We were trying to be inclusive. But when
Good point. That's exactly why they did it.
we did that, we also threw the spiritual baby out with the bathwater.
You see. You see. When they threw out religion, she forgot to say Christianity because this country was originally a Christian country. Okay? They threw out the Bibles and prayer. This country never read the Quran or whatever the Buddhists read. This country had Bibles and had 10 commandments and had prayer and Jesus in the schools. They threw that out. She's saying religion, but she's talking about Christianity. But now she's trying to sneak in a concept. She separated the two, religion and spirituality, as two separate concepts, and that you can unskin spirituality. You can take out the religious skin, the religious suit, throw it out, which is Christianity, and keep spirituality. What is it anchored in, ma'am?
Spirituality and religion are two different things. About 30% of people in the United States say, I am spiritual, but I am not religious. For me,
I'm sure you've heard that before, right? You had to have heard that. That's a common statement. And then these people have been educated by this public school system. That's one thing you'll find in common with many of these people who say, I am spiritual, but I'm not religious. Okay? And what they're going to do here at the Fetzer Institute, they're going to capitalize on that.
Spirituality is experienced in my family, in nature, as I am moved by music. What's interesting is that when we take people who are spiritual but not religious, and spiritual and religious across many beautiful faith traditions, into the MRI, we see the exact same neural correlates, whether
Because humans are innately religious, ma'am. Because we were designed to worship something, ma'am. Because
we are talking to God, feeling the presence of nature or spirit, we all use the same neural correlates. When we looked at the risk and resilience involved in personal spiritual life, it turned out that a child with a strong spirituality was 90% less likely to have depression. There's nothing in the clinical or social sciences that is 90% protective against depression. There is no capacity within the child as profoundly central to all other lines of development than a strong, natural spiritual core.
this, to me, this video should be used to recruit pastors to our movement. Because these people are not just saying, hey, we have this idea and we're going to keep it to ourselves over here while sending our kids to the schoolhouse to learn how to read and write. No, these people, these are pagans. Okay? They're saying, no, we found something about spirituality and that it's very, very important that you cannot separate the child from spirituality. And we're going to the public school to reintroduce this, but from a secular humanist, pagan perspective.
The crisis is that we socialize young children out of natural spiritual awareness.
This society doesn't want human beings. They want perfect examples of human beings. The Question Project is just a place to be human.
The Question Project is a class where we ask questions. You're able to share what makes us unique in a way that we can contribute to people around us and contribute to ourselves as well.
The Question Project is one of hundreds of educational pilot programs geared toward fostering spirituality in schools.
Question Project is really just teaching us to voice your opinion because your voice matters. Being able to think about yourself as a human being and say, this is who I am. How do I become who I want to be?
Courses like this are rooted in social and emotional learning.
You see, I was waiting. I really, I know I'm making fun and I'm joking and laughing as I go, and it might sound on the one hand like I'm happy to be proven right and things like that. I'm not. This is very concerning. This is proof that we've been duped, right? You were promised that you were going to get a system, or a system was possible, that can only teach how to read, write, and arithmetic. But the same people that convinced you of that are now coming back around and telling you, hey, it's actually not a good thing to exclude spirituality. And since we've already removed Christianity, we moved on from Christianity, we would like to reintroduce this in a way that is not anywhere near Christian, that is in fact anti-Christian.
A style of teaching that was pioneered by Linda Lanteri.
I did not imagine that I would be living to see some SEL in 92% of the nation's schools.
I hope you understood and heard that clearly. There is some form of social and emotional learning in 92% of American schools, which is to say, there's SEL in the school near you, even conservative schools, conservative school districts. So, after you hear that, ask yourself a question. And again, to be clear, you cannot opt out of social and emotional learning because in most cases it doesn't introduce itself as social and emotional learning, and in some cases it's mandatory because who doesn't want their kids to participate in an anti-bullying program? And in this case, actually it sounds very good. The question, or the big question project, or whatever that whole thing was about questions, which I would actually name the worldview project, because that's where the big questions of life are going to be asked. And then whoever has the upper hand, in most cases, the teacher, will get to set the tone as to what the proper answers or the accepted answers would be. If the teacher fails to do it, Hollywood will do it, and the mainstream media will do it. Not the Christian, because the Christian is asking for a lot. And so Christianity is unpopular. 92% of schools. That means almost every school, 9 out of 10 schools, have some kind of social and emotional learning, which is spirituality, as they are telling you now. Okay.
There are actually hundreds of studies that show the beneficial outcomes of SEL. There's improved emotional and social skills. Children improve in their academic performance 11 percentile points higher.
That's
But Lanterry
actually
believes
cannot be
programs
proven.
like the Question Project are an opportunity for SEL to go further by developing children's spiritual capacities.
How can I figure out who I really am?
Why do people hurt each other? What happens when I die?
When young people can ask those deep questions, they begin to feel that our questions are okay, that everybody counts. There's a foundation of feeling love. All of those things engage kids beyond skill building and into that realm that makes us uniquely human. I knew that if we didn't add the spiritual dimension to this work, we were going to leave kids with not all they needed to know. And
um you know, I know there's people out there who would argue that social and emotional learning is not spirituality. Social and emotional learning does not seek to spiritualize children, right? As the article that I was reading earlier from Lisa Logan mentions here, she asked the question, was social and emotional learning put into schools to benefit children, or is it being used as a vehicle for religious conversion? As a Christian, I will tell you that it is being used for religious conversion and not to Christianity. Because social and emotional learning has not declared Christ as Lord. Social and emotional learning has not declared itself a Christ-centered framework. Social and emotional learning has something else as the center, and that is the child. In other words, the human. Secular social and emotional learning is secular humanist, or spiritual humanist, if you want to call it that. Whatever the case may be, social and emotional learning has not proclaimed Christ as Lord. And Jesus himself said, again, that you're either with him, in other words, you declare yourself with Christ, or you are anti-Christ. You're either gathering with him and for him, or you're scattering. Social emotional learning is scattering. So yes, the fact is social emotional learning is a vehicle for religious conversion. Again, if you read the article from Lisa Logan, and I highly recommend it, you will find that these people are very religious. If you go back to the top, you will find that some of the practices that they're doing in the schools as part of social and emotional learning are based on religious activities from theosophical, Buddhist, and Native American church practices. Social and emotional learning is a doctrine of demons. In my opinion, there is nothing in terms of reasons as to why people should take their kids out of government schools, as to why pastors must condemn the government schools once and for all from the pulpits. There's no other reason more powerful and more inviting and more clear as social and emotional learning. Because if you do a research and you look at it for what it is, you listen to the people in their own words, right? We're listening to a video from them telling you. And they're not just telling you that they've just started doing this, so you still have time. No, they've been doing this for decades, been working at this for decades. They have so much power and so much resources. Social and emotional learning and the CASEL and other institutions like it go all the way up to the United Nations and UNESCO. This is a global thing. And you mean to tell me that you would hear this kind of information and continue to fear those teachers in your congregation, or continue to not want to offend them? I mean, they should be sounding the alarm. The teachers in these institutions who are Christians should be the very first one to come out and say, hey guys, that's terrible. Get your kids out. Get your kids out, because you cannot opt them out of this. And of course, because the government should not be educating your children anyway. But let's continue.
And the Fetzer Institute is really poised right now to step up in supporting this movement.
Fetzer understands that a basic science to establish the natural spirituality of the child presented a blueprint for building a new system of education.
Okay. There's a revolution within the revolution. If there was ever a reason for a Christian counter-revolution, this is it. We are saying, I and the people like me, there's many of us, by the way, I'm not alone. We are saying that Christians, Bible-believing Christians, must have a Christian philosophy of education. A Christian philosophy of education is a philosophy of education that is centered on Christ, not on the child. Christ-centered. It points back to Christ. These people are already in place. They already have the system. As she said earlier, the other one, 91% of public school systems are in on it. to some level. And they will continue because they have a lot of funding attached to this. And it's been accepted. It's a Trojan horse, and it's already inside the gates. So here we are today. They are telling you that they are amping up their shenanigans. And then, if you remember, the ATF, which posted this not too long ago, a few days ago, said that education should be directed at the whole personality of a child. We have ignored this too long at our peril. Now, when she said we have ignored this, she's talking about what they're talking about over there at the Fetzer Institute. That we should come out unapologetically and declare that we're actually spiritualizing. We're doing spiritual education. Okay? Again, the AFD post said, no education is complete until it includes social and emotional learning, building up the whole child and their values. So they're building up the whole child and their values. Which are those? Which values are we talking about? Inclusive? Yes. Confused? Yes. Antichrist? Absolutely. Those are going to be the values. Now, before I conclude here, because obviously, as you can imagine, it doesn't get better from here. I just want to point out that these people have never ever lied. The people who lie are the politicians and the school administrators and the teachers, of course. Sometimes they don't lie, they're just naive. Sometimes they just don't know. But if you go in these people's research and trajectory, they were always upfront. Sometimes they were careful. They did not use kind of inflammatory language. But most of the times, they were always upfront with their agendas.
People of Fetzer walk the walk. They live out spiritual values.
I came here after spending many years working in the corporate setting. I was looking for something that had a greater capacity to contribute something to the world. At Fetzer, I found an organization that was really interested in making the world a more loving place, and that's what we are here doing.
Now, just understand the hubris of what he just said. Making the world a more loving place. They are utopian. In what way can they possibly make the world a more loving place? Without Christ, you can't do it. Child-centered, you can't do it. But that's what they're doing. That's their aim. That's their goal. They're not hiding it. This is on YouTube for all to see on Front Street. Hey, you can say we never told you. So we're here to sound the alarm. We're here to let people know, hey, the government school is not a place for Christians to send their children. I beg of you, parents, get your kids out. Pastors, it's your job. People are not going to listen to me. People are going to dismiss me because I'm just a talking head on the internet, and they should. I'm not anybody's pastor. But the pastors need to do this. The pastors need to read up on this. They need to equip themselves. They need to understand what's going on, and they need to let their people. That's part of discipleship, to challenge your people and to take up the initiatives to help parents so they can um, better disciple their children. Praying for kids, laying hands on them, sending them to these people is unacceptable. It just is. So how about let's stop doing that? It's hard. Yes, it's gonna be hard. We haven't figured that. As I speak, people would think, yo, John has figured it out. He has a great job. One income is enough to. No, 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 no. You're wrong. We're actually poor. On one income, we can barely make it. We just have no plans in sending our children to the government in order for us to live comfortably. Not gonna happen. Not on my watch, anyway. So I'm saying what I'm saying to just help people to understand that in case you're thinking that John has it all figured out, well, you're wrong. I don't have it all figured out. I am trying to figure it out myself. I just have one simple conviction. I cannot justify in any way sending my kids to these people to educate. Because what they're saying, what they're trying to do, that's my job. And yes, so is teaching them how to count, so is teaching them about science. Whatever I don't understand, we'll learn it together. Or I'll find someone whose worldview aligns with mine and who believes that education is not to be child centered. Education is to be Christ centered, no matter what the subject. Education is to be Bible saturated and supported and guided. Whatever the subject is to be submitted under the scriptures, the divine revelation. As we seek to understand natural revelation, we rely on divine revelation as our guide, as our lenses through which we see everything else. That's what a proper Christian education is, and that's what I want for my kids. Those people do not believe that. Those people would call me a religious Christian fundamentalist and someone that is not to be admitted anywhere in polite society as far as they're concerned. And that's okay. I'm good. So thank you so much for those who've been watching me thus far. I've been going on for a while now. Please, again, consider subscribing. Follow the links if you want to support my efforts. And I will see you on the flip side.